I see these programs, especially cooking programs, cookery programs saying the healthy grains. And I think, no wonder people are so confused. They're so confused about I don't like the word healthy, because you could say that apples are healthy, but they're not for me.
Okay, Annette, welcome. First of all, thank you for being willing to do this. I always applaud people for being willing to step up, because a lot of people don't want to share this stuff. It's personal, it's private. Some people get some grief for it, but you're willing to do that, and I certainly thank you for sharing your story. So, with that said, tell us a little about yourself. What's going on with your life, and tell us about your background and where you are today and that type of stuff.
Well, it's been quite a journey, really. And I think I've only really solved my health issues in the last, say, 3 or 4 years since YouTube, basically. I've seen many, many doctors over the years, and I've done what I've been told to do and never managed to heal myself. And I come on here because I just think maybe I can give something back, because I'm so grateful for finding doctors like you and others on YouTube. My main problem is not weight loss or needing to lose weight. It's gut pain, which is basically just gas, it turns out, fermenting gas, which I can't get rid of, which causes crippling pain. And I've lived with that for years. But it all started with a sort of traumatic event in my life when I was 24. And I started to be strange with food and not wanting to eat, and then eating too much. And I spent the first 10 years of that marriage suffering from bulimia, nervosa, in and out of health places, all wanting me to put on weight. But actually the weight wasn't the thing. And I've now realized that it was more of a self-harm, basically, a self-disgust issue of not liking what's happened to me and what I've done and the situation I'm in. And it took 10 years really to be strong enough to say enough's enough. And I've ended that marriage and started on this journey of healing, which has not been smooth. It's been a bumpy ride with lots of ups and downs, because following the health advice from hospitals and GPs has not done me any favors. And I just had once I found YouTube. Well, no, it was before then. I ended up in hospital with a hospital dietitian who diagnosed me with IBS, which is a sort of fluffy nothing term. I had some tests to see if I had cancer or anything like that. No, nothing. So basically said, oh, well, it's IBS. But it was quite useful, because she introduced me to this thing called the FODMAP diet, which is for fermentable chemicals that are in really mostly fruit and veg. She gave me this booklet of foods that were high or low risk. And I was astonished and delighted to see that meat, fish, eggs, and cheese were all pretty much low risk. I was like, oh, this is a doddle for me, because I'd already, through my journey, eliminated sort of processed foods, because they always seem to do me some harm, because whatever was in them. So I was pretty much on basic food, but I did think that I had to eat a lot of fruit and veg. I just believed that. I've been told it ever since I was young. I'd had lots of bowel problems along the way, and the doctors always said, oh, you should eat more fiber, need to eat more fiber. So more fiber was in, more issues. So even though the FODMAP diet started me on, it wasn't the end. It wasn't an end to me. She kept saying to me that I needed to reintroduce vegetables, challenge my guts. And every time I did it, I had a miserable day because this is happening. So I was like, why do I have to eat all these veg? And at that time, I started to look on YouTube. And first of all, I found Paul Saladino, who was, well into sort of natural, everything natural, nothing processed, and then low carb, and you. And once I'd found you, it was a sort of a reckoning. It was so fantastic to hear somebody say, you don't have to eat all the fruit and veg, you'll still stay alive. Because people are so intent with fruit and veg have got all the vitamins and minerals. I believe that's so hard that I'd drop dead if I didn't eat them. That is what is healthy. And when you said, no, you don't eat veg, and I look at you and I think, flippin' heck, how can you have a body that's all that muscle and health without fruit and veg? And then I've over time learned that actually meat, because I really only ate a bit of chicken before. I've very, very occasionally eat red meat, because in this country, red meat, you have seriously bad health issues with red meat. But actually, I've never felt so well, really. I've never felt so well. I'm 61 years old, and I joined a gym, and it's given me a body that I can do stuff with. I can walk the dog. I can pick up something off the floor without oomping. It's just, I just want to keep a body as long as I can. I will go to the gym and eat that diet that I'm so happy with. I mean, they are delicious foods. I do cook sort of standard, from scratch, but still vegetables and meat for my family, because they don't want to give up. I buy organic flour. I do make cakes. I buy as much organic ingredients as I can. They're not in it with me because they don't have gut pain. So, I still think that they should go the whole hog, but, it's everyone's choice.
And that's an important part. Yeah, it is everyone's choice, and we should be allowed to make those choices. It's interesting, you mentioned IBS is kind of a fluff diagnosis. I kind of think, it's kind of probably just eating the wrong food that you're not designed to eat, or not well designed to eat, or adapted to eat. And I think a lot of us, IBS is becoming more and more common as our diet devolves further away from what we probably were designed to eat as humans, and whether that's meat or meat plus a few plants. When you were on a low FOD, because it's interesting, there's a low FODMAP diet didn't completely solve your issues. Is that fair to say?
Definitely fair to say, yes.
Yeah. So there's it's kind of funny. There's a physician out there he's criticizing people going to CarnivoreDiet because, well, the only reason it works is because people have IBS and are on and it's a low FODMAP diet. But then I have someone like you that says, I was on a low FODMAP diet and I'm still having some issues. So just for the people that aren't familiar with FODMAP diets or low FODMAP diets, what foods are still allowed that would be considered plant foods that you could still eat that still would give you trouble? Well,
they give you a list, and there's various lists. I downloaded several from the internet. They don't always match. Mm-hmm. But you start off very strict, and the idea is you reintroduce. So very strict would be no leafy greens. They're one of the worst. So there's sprouts and cabbages and all of that spinach that I used to eat, thinking it was so healthy. And onions and garlic and leeks, anything in that vegetable family. And for me, it was a fructose really in apples, bananas. You were supposed to eat an unripe banana. Well, honestly, the taste of that was so yucky, you might as well not eat it. It's like, what's that for? And so I gradually thought, well, what is the point of these? You could eat 2 sprouts. And it was, why? I mean, in the end, I just thought, well, let's just not have any sprouts. Why am I limiting myself? It felt more normal to just go with the foods that I liked. And every time I challenged, sorry, I haven't answered your question. I haven't got the full list with me. But you can download these lists from the internet they're rated high, medium, and low. So a low fruit would be an unripe banana, anything with low sugar, basically. And they listed all the fruits, vegetables, sauces, which I didn't have sauces anyway, but things like ketchup got far too much sugar in. Then there was, the alcohol. Now, that was interesting because I did like red wine at the time, but I could only do a very small glass of red wine because it's way too sweet. Whereas you could have spirits. So I did have a spell of thinking, I can have gin. But actually, that wasn't very good for me because I got plastered far too quickly. And no, that definitely wasn't good. So I've actually managed to kick the alcohol altogether now, which is I'm really pleased with. I've got rid of another couple of issues, cramps. I suffer from cramps. I tried to do yoga, which is basically from one stretching position to another. But in the sort of severe stretches, my muscles would cramp. And that wasn't the reason for giving up the alcohol, but it definitely has changed since then. So you could have some alcohol, the spirits you could have, but nothing like rum, because that was far too sweet. And my main thing was the fructose. So whereas I thought that an apple, there's nothing could be wrong with God's green apples, they couldn't be harmful. I learned that actually for me, they just fermented in my guts. I can't tolerate the sugar. So I basically went to low sugars and then no sugars. And I do have, along the way, I must say that they were worried about my diet. So they said I had to have a DEXA scan, which is this thing that sort of looks into your bones to see how dense they are. And I was told I had osteoporosis. I'd never broken a bone, but I had osteoporosis. I must take these medications, and I must drink, milk. So I must eat dairy. Well, the results of those medications were I had loose teeth, and so I've lost some teeth. And I've had another DEXA scan 4 years later, and I've got osteopenia now. Now I don't know how that is, which is a lesser form of osteoporosis. So I don't know whether it's the diet or the exercise, because obviously I've done all the sort of resistance exercises. And I do still make my own yogurt. I buy organic whole milk. We can't get raw milk in this country. But so I buy organic whole milk and I make my own yogurt. It is so easy to do. I have a slow cooker, nothing fancy, no special yogurt maker, just a slow cooker, 4 pints in, and it's a timing thing about heating, then adding the yogurt, sitting it overnight, and then I strain it. So it's really, really thick. It's like a soft cheese, basically. And that's what I will have with my meat, my steak every night. I'll have a dollop of that because I don't have a sauce as such. And so it helps moisten it. And I do think for me, although I'd like to not have the dairy, I think for me, I better stick with a bit of dairy for my bones. I'd still like to investigate that because they were really strong on the must have dairy for healthy bones. I don't want to break a bone. So, and I love that yogurt. There's years ago, I wouldn't have given you time of day for plain yogurt. It was just, I could not stomach it. But my taste buds have completely changed. They really have. I can taste that sort of sweetness. I can taste it. And occasionally people have said, oh, these are gluten-free cakes or whatever, because I've tried that. And I've had a little bit, and the sugar's overwhelming. I can't stand it. So in that respect, it's really nice to have something that I can actually, that is a little bit of sweetness. And fortunately for me, I'm usually eat 2 meals a day. I've had lunch today and I'll have a steak tonight. I eat a lot of eggs. And I love this life because I don't seem to put on weight. I stay the same weight. I've got bags of energy, and I don't have that, because I used to be quite a hangry person, as they call it. Oh, I used to hate myself for it, but I was a right old cow. I just got so, and I used to think, what's the matter with me? But basically that was the insulin. And now I feel like I'm a fairly flat line. I don't react to situations that would normally completely stress me out, and I go off on one, whereas I just can handle it. I just can. And I love that feeling. I absolutely love it. It's sort of, it's like a control that you don't need to control. You just are in control. And the other thing is I'm never hungry. I never really get hungry. I can feel those pangs every so often, and I'll think, well, it's not convenient now. I'll leave it. and just goes away until later on in the day. And I think that's whereas before I used to think, oh, what time's tea? Oh, God, is it that long? I had really ups and downs. I was always thinking about food because I was always sort of semi-hungry or feeling a bit wobbly-headed or, a bit funny or with the blood sugars. But now it's not. There's so many advantages that I can't really, it's hard to explain to everyone just how good they would feel if they made that choice. But it's, for someone who's not in pain, I think it's quite a big leap. If they don't need to lose weight and they're not in pain, why, people say to me, oh, a little bit of what you fancy does you good. Oh, yeah, but does it really do me? It might do me good for 5 minutes of eating it, but 20 minutes later, I'd be doubled up anyway. And ultimately, I want to feel good all the time. I mean, I don't know anybody personally who has made these choices. Nobody in my family, nobody in my friends. I don't know anyone else. So it's been fantastic to listen to other people like me. And that's what I found them through your channel and thought, actually, I'm not going to die. It's not that weird. Once you get used to the plate, that was quite a challenge because I used to have all this leaves and stuff and tomatoes and now I don't. That just took a transition time to be satisfied with a plate full of meat and eggs. And now it doesn't bother me at all because at the end of that meal that I've served myself, I am completely satisfied. I'm not thinking, now what can I have? Whereas there was that, I don't need a sweet afterwards. It doesn't occur to me to have one. I'm full up as far as I'm concerned. I'm not overly full because I've sort of got used to how much is good for me without feeling stuffed. And you can just go until the next meal. You don't have to worry about, I don't eat in the mornings, just get up, I go to my classes, I train fasted. And when I come home, it's now time for lunch and I'll have something to eat. But I never feel that desperation. And in fact, friends, if I'm with a friend, they'll say, oh, are you hungry? I'm thinking, I'm fine. But they were all running on a clock that's telling them, now you've got to eat. And it's quite freeing to be away from that. It's liberating to think you're not tied to having to consume something when it's not convenient. It's brilliant.
It is kind of interesting. I hear a lot of people say it's freeing, even though people say, well, it's a restrictive diet, but yet it's extremely freeing from those types of things. And the other thing, a couple comments, you mentioned, you had issues with your teeth from taking the medication, usually the bisphosphonates, which people prescribe for these osteoporotic cases. That's one of the side effects. People have jaw osteonecrosis or certain fractures that occur. The fact that you saw an improvement in your bone mineral density going from osteoporotic to a lesser form osteopenia is something I've seen not infrequently, and probably it has to do with improving the quality of the diet, getting more protein in the diet, which meat is a very good source of, and then also the resistance training. So good on you for doing that. And you're right, there are not a lot of people yet that are doing this. There are many, many thousands that have, and they're just kind of different places. So it's great. Like I said, you sharing your story will inspire other people to do this. I guarantee this little video, when we publish it, will inspire some percentage of people to do this, and that's great. We just kind of keep going until we get there. And so, do you get have you been back to see the doctors? That were diagnosed IBS and telling you to shove more fiber in and any of that stuff lately? Don't need to, probably.
No, I'm just not been back. I did want the DEXA scan because I wanted to stop taking the drugs, and so I thought, I need that scan to show me that I can. And they said, oh, yes, you can stop taking those. They were also prescribing a calcium carbonate and I've stopped taking that as well. And I've yet to, because of COVID, you can't really get an appointment, but I've got a conversation sometime late June with a pharmacist who I'm going to discuss that with, because what I've noted, I heard about it on someone else like me. I listened to them talking about their osteoporosis and how they were prescribed that drug and how their joints hurt. They had their pain in their joints. Well, I don't have pain in all the joints, but I've got a sports injury in my shoulder here, which I just think it's tendonitis. and another one in my hip, which I overzealously did some stuff in lockdown in the garden. And they've been niggling me. I've had them all checked. There's nothing broken or anything. But this woman said that the calcium carbonate was being laid down in her joints. Well, I've stopped that. And it's very slow progress, but it's definitely not getting worse. And yet over the years, these two injuries that now 3 or 4 years old are getting worse and worse. So I've yet to discuss that, but I've taken vitamin D that I started taking on top of that because of COVID. And I'm still taking that, but that doesn't have, as far as I can see, it doesn't have the calcium carbonate. So yeah, I'm not bothered about going to the doctor. I dread having a blood test because I know that they're going to say, oh, you're LDL, I don't want them to know because I'm not going to change. I'm just not going to change. And also a friend of mine, I have to tell you this, that a friend of mine, close friend, said, I'm so sorry for you, Annette, with your restricted diet. You have such a restricted diet. However, my social life and my experience of life has opened up because with the IBS, it's very isolating because you can't be happy and enjoying yourself when you're crippled. You have to fake it, basically. You go out for a meal. It's always the celebration. You go out for a meal and you're sat at the table thinking, oh gosh, or you're just at home. I mean, my family got used to the gas. I mean, they just got used to it. But outside of my home, I wasn't able to release the gas. It's just too embarrassing. So that crippled me. So I basically, for an ease of life, because it had to come out, otherwise it's painful, I would stay at home. As soon as I'd had my lunch, that was the end of my active day. And I'd stay at home. And I was sort of a prisoner in my own house after I'd eaten, which, so it's not restrictive. For me, I can have my lunch, sit here in total calm. There's nothing going on. Whereas before there was all this gurgle, all this stuff going on that was just noisy and very painful. So I don't think it's restricted at all. It might be restricted in what it looks like, but in terms of my social life and what I can do with my body and how I can be with other people, as long as they can get over the fact that my plate looks different to theirs, which that is tricky. They just know me as a bit of an oddball anyway, I think.
Yeah, I think it's kind of almost, you can kind of see it as a humor. I'm a prisoner in my own house with gas, and so it's I know I don't need to make light of that, but you could see where that would be kind of a humorous type of sort of hangout. And now you're not there; it's got to be much better. You don't eat fruit. I mean, there's a lot of people now, or at least some people, saying, "Well, you can't do a carnivore diet without fruit. You have to add that in." I don't say that personally. I think that's a choice you can make. But there are some people insisting that you're going to get sick without all this fruit. Are you feeling sick because you're not including fruit in your diet?
Definitely not, because fruit that's got the fructose in it. And in fact, the FODMAP thing was all about, I can't remember, it stands for some fermentable
oligosaccharides, oligosaccharides and some other things in there, yeah.
Yeah, one of the chemicals was definitely fructose that really set me off. And that's why, I battled with apples for years. I said, it can't be the apples because they're natural. It can't be. It just can't be. And yet it is. It's any really sweet fruits. So grapes, they're delicious. My tongue still craves them. I'd love to bite into an apple. I did enjoy, and I do miss that, but it's not really worth it for me. It's not worth it because are they actually doing anything for my health? No, it's just my mouth and that sweetness that I did enjoy, and crunching an apple. But there's plenty worse things to have to give up, isn't there? I just think, if that's what it takes, if I have to give up all that stuff to be well, then I'm up for it. I've had plenty of years of ill health. That bad diet. I was on low fat, chicken, high veg, grains, whole grains, what's advised for so many years, believing that is the right thing to do. And yet it did me no favors at all. It really didn't. All those years of of being uncomfortable and in pain. And now I'm free of it. I'm just free of it. And I'm also free of having to, I do plan meals for my family, but for me, it's easy. You never have to worry what you're having for tea. It's so easy. I can't describe how it is freeing. It's freeing from the pain, freeing from the worry about food. If I thought I was going to be putting on a bit of weight because I've overeaten on the fat, then I just eat less fat. I don't overload the fat because I don't really know. I'm just an ordinary sort of layman. I don't really know how much fat there is in eggs. I eat 3 a day. I don't know how much fat there is in my belly porks. They are quite fatty and I love them. And there's Paul Saladino saying, oh no, that fat, you shouldn't have that fat because that fat might have pigs have fed a grain diet. But that's a step too far for me. I love it. If you cook it in an air fryer, it's so crispy and delicious. And I've learned through YouTube, I've learned how to cook a steak, which, they were, I was not good to begin with, but I have perfected. If you do one every day, you gradually learn. And I have a pan now, I have a cast iron pan, which sits on the cooker. It never gets to a cupboard because I use it every day. And after I've cooked my steak, I get some kitchen paper, just take off the rest of the fat, and there it is, ready for the next day. I don't even have to wash the pan up. I never wash it up because it gets so hot the next day. Oh, that's another thing. I've got a brilliant butcher's that I found. You can't get this stuff in the supermarket, but I buy basically a couple of kilos at a time of suet, which is the stuff that's all around the kidneys, and it looks pretty horrendous when you get it because it's just been cut off the animal. And then I pop it in a big pan in the oven for about 4 hours, and then I strain it, and then it's the purest white tallow, and that's all I use to cook with. It's fabulous stuff. Whereas if you buy, I think we can get a Tora, which is suet, but that's got wheat in it, I've discovered. So I pretty much don't like any of those. If you can make it yourself, why would you want to go and buy it? It's so cheap as well. I mean, the fat is dirt cheap because no one wants to buy it. Everyone's still going low fat here. And I just bought some ribeyes. They are slightly more expensive, but I always get some that are on offer. And I was always afraid of fat. That's another thing. I was always afraid, cut every bit of fat off. And I'm really sad that is how I've thought for so many years, because I've now learned that's where a lot of the vitamins the vitamins are. You have to have the fat. And it's something that I grew up not knowing that. That's why I think I was unhealthy for all those many years. And when I look around me and I see people, I think, you just don't know. I'm so sad for you. I see them struggling to lose weight. And I think, and they're Weight Watchers or Slimmers World. And I think, if only you'd listen to me, but they won't. They'll have nothing to do with it. They just say, that's far too weird.
Let me ask you, because you mentioned, because your friends, you've been able to go out and they think you're kind of weird for eating whatever, but it sounds like, you're restricted at home and they may not have known what you've been going through. Obviously your family does. Your family's been here the whole time. What does the family think now of how you're doing? And are they happy for you? Do they think you're crazy, or what are their thoughts?
They're so happy for me because they are the only ones really that have seen my misery over the years. They've, my children are now in their early 20s and their mum's always been unwell. I've always had issues and I've always had gut pain. And so they're delighted. I mean, they listened to all that wind and they just got so used to it. That's how our mother is. But they sympathised. They didn't really know how to help me. My husband, he seems to be he's got guts of steel, can eat almost anything. I still think he'd benefit from, and I have actually cut him down on the amount of veg and upped the meat. He likes meat, fortunately. He's not a great chewer, so he's not into sort of chewing off the bone like I am. I love that sort of thing. No, they're all really pleased because my life has changed. You know, they're also this is the thing that they really notice, is that I was basically, by about 6 o'clock most evenings, I was tired, I was hungry, and I was ratty. And everyone got used to that's how mum is by this time of the evening. And I didn't like myself. I didn't know why I felt so bad. I felt really, everything was too much. And it was tea time. And when the children are growing up, that can be a stressful time, trying to get them to eat food. And that carried on for so many years, as just that's how it is. Don't upset mum, you know, when she says it's tea time, jump to it and get to the table. And now I'm just such an easier person to live with. And they all notice it. They all notice it. It's like, oh, mum, it's so easy because you're so the same all the time. That's fantastic. You know, and I'm also not flapped, or my mood is just a stable mood where things crop up and I'm not phased. And I'm not the most confident people, and I would be phased by stuff all the time, but now I can sort of somehow not get upset, just keep my cool and deal with it, which that must be it, because there's nothing else that's changed in my life. It's just the feeling of sort of stability. And I don't think people realize how they all say, oh yes, I'm getting hangry, as if it has to be like that. Now I know it doesn't have to be like that. I'm thinking, well, surely everyone needs to know that they don't have to be like it. And I've given up with it now, but I joined a Facebook group for IBS sufferers. And I regularly put my comments in, oh, try giving up all the greens, or why? Because they'd say, I'm having real problems with so-and-so. And in the end, I just gave up, because all they want to do is to compare and talk about medications. Now, there isn't really any. There is, I think it's called Buscopan, and these IBS sort of mint that you can take doesn't do anything. It's just, that's all the doctors prescribe. I've got a cupboard full of them. They just don't work because you're still eating. I think my guts were so irritated. I used to get a real bloat. Like every evening, I looked pregnant with this bloated belly. And it was just so irritated all the time. So any amount of those mints, it's just like off in the wind. Yeah.
It's interesting that some of those, these different social media groups for different diseases are often sort of moderated or often beholden to some of the pharmaceutical companies. They almost sponsor this stuff, and they like to continue. It's almost a marketing arm for drug sales. Quite honestly, it's another place where people can kind of talk about the drugs they're using and which one works better. But that's really kind of how a lot of this stuff. And they don't take kindly to people saying, hey, you don't need the drugs. Particularly if you tell them to eliminate foods they like to eat, because then they get really mad because, oh my God, I've got to give up my junk food. And it's really can be challenging. As far as, what do you plan on, now with this newfound freedom? You said you're in the gym, you're doing other things. What have you been able to do that you couldn't do before?
Well, I can socialize. That is my main thing. My life was so restricted because I wouldn't dare go out, because I knew I'd be crippled and it would be a miserable experience for me. So I didn't go to things. I was quite a recluse, to be perfectly honest. And my family just got used to that mum wouldn't come. Or if I did, I'd be moaning on the way home. Oh, my belly. Oh, I'm in agony. They just thought, oh, there she goes again. So I think that it's what's changed for me is it's opened up all sorts of possibilities. I can go to things. Now I found out, a funeral buffet. Oh, honestly, in this country, they have a spread and it's all pastries, and it might be homemade, but sandwiches, pastries, tarts, buns, scones, everything like that, because I don't eat any of that stuff. And so when it came to a funeral recently, it was in a country pub, and I was able to phone the proprietor earlier and order a separate plate for me, which consisted of some, he didn't really understand what I meant, but I had some just cold meats and some cheeses, which was fine. I just needed to eat something because everyone else did. I didn't want to sit there with nothing. So, I can go to play. Whereas previously I would have gone to that funeral, ate all the food that everyone else did, and sat there miserable, I've put on a brave face so many times. When I think over the years, I just had to pretend that I'm okay because people so much want you to be. Are you enjoying yourself? Oh, yes, I am. Thinking, oh my God, what's inside? And with pain is quite a hard thing to ignore. When it's a daily thing, it's just, oh, here we go again. It gets you down. And I did go to the doctors, and I was told by the surgeon who did an operation on my backside, because I got terribly constipated with this high fiber diet, which is supposed to release, but actually I'm on a very low fiber and much happier. He just said, oh, let it go, but you don't understand, mate. You just don't understand. It's not like that. A lot of it's up here. And other people would say, oh, just have a little bit, or, the doctors, they don't really, what I have noticed that if you go to the doctor with one thing, like when I went with this IBS and said, I've heard you get some medications, they don't really say, oh, what sort of things are you eating? Nobody in our GP surgeries ever mentions the food, which really, that is it. It's just what I was putting in. And that's cured, healed. I'm totally healed. And the other thing to mention is that I've got two older sisters, and one died just before COVID of metabolic syndrome. She'd been obese all her life and followed doctor's advice, got bigger and bigger and bigger until she just was that size. And gradually, over the years, bits of her went wrong. It just went wrong until eventually she died. They had to turn the machine off her heart. But she was already having dialysis, and she'd already got one of those ride-ons because she couldn't walk. And that was all. If only they'd said to her, don't worry. I mean, she had drawfuls of medications, drawfuls. And if only they'd said to her, look, you need to get, I'm sure she was self-soothing for mental problems, really, which I was aware of, but couldn't fix. But it's sort of considered a taboo that you don't mention what the person's eating. No matter how enormous they are when they sit in front of the doctor, you don't mention what they're eating. You help them with this medication or that medication. And she was type 2 diabetes, and she was told, oh, once you're type 2 diabetes, that's it. We give you this medication. And gradually it got more and more medications. And no one ever, she's carried on with all the sugary drinks and all of that stuff that she liked until it was too late. And then in the hospital in the last few days, we said, well, surely she shouldn't be having those sugary drinks now. And they said, we do let patients who are that near the end have exactly what they want, because what's the point of limiting it now? And then within a few weeks, she had died.
Yeah, it's very sad. I want to go back to a point you made about your mental stability and the fact that you're not angry, and not being in chronic pain every day wears on you. It's oppressing. It makes you angry, frustrated, and we have a society of people that are on somewhere on that scale. A lot of people are that way, and we see so much anger and divisiveness and vitriol in society these days. And you just wonder if you could get people just on a better diet, what would that do? And then in the UK and other places, they're continuing to push to, hey, you don't need to be eating meat. You need to cut back on meat. What are your thoughts around those topics about, should we be limiting meat and telling people to not eat the stuff?
I hear it all the time. I hear it's in our local newspaper. We have just for our county newspaper, and they were saying, meat-free Mondays in the schools, and these special burgers, meat-free burgers, that everyone's trying them and how delicious they are. It's all because we need to cut down on meat for and then they chuck in this environmental reasons. Well, I went to agricultural college in the 1980s, well, late 70s, 80s. And at that time, there was use of fertilizers, but not much. Most of it was what we called rotational grazing. So cows graze one bit down to the sort of the stems right down in the leaves, and then moved on to a fresh bit. And they went round the farm day by day until they came back to the fresh, now grown up grass. And that's what we learned. That's the way it was. And there's this, I can't see the environmental impact of that other than good. They fertilize the land as they're going. I can't see how that could possibly be damaging the earth compared to the damaging chemicals and the fertilizer production. That to me has got to be an elephant in the room that no one is looking at, saying that you can't eat meat, but you can put all those chemicals on the crops and to get them to grow. I'm absolutely convinced. However, the media, what I listen to, it makes me cross, because my family will know that you can't listen to the news with mum around, because I'm, voice mouthing off at the TV all the time, saying that they're wrong, and they don't know anything. But unfortunately, most people do believe what they hear on the TV, especially the BBC. When they start in this country, the BBC about, this recent health problem, the BBC were considered to be right. Whereas I'm a big fan of YouTube, getting my news. And so it's very hard when, especially that food pyramid and all that sort of stuff. I remember a few years ago, I was thinking that's going to change. That's definitely going to change. And it didn't change. It was still, they brought out the same food pyramid as they've had for the last, goodness knows how many years. It didn't change it. And I just think, well, the people I know there's this big thing about, don't listen to YouTube. There's nutters on there. You should get your information from the BBC and the general mainstream media. That's the sense. And I just, if they can't get it right about the food, which they have not got it right, they really have not. And yet then I see these programs, especially cooking programs, cookery programs saying the healthy grains. And I think, no wonder people are so confused. They're so confused about what I don't like the word healthy, because you could say that apples are healthy, but they're not for me. So I think people are too afraid to think actually how they feel. I mean, I've met a lot of people over my time who say, I know someone who's got a bit of gut issues. In fact, it's amazingly common, but nobody's doing anything because they're all stuck in following the guidelines. And they're too afraid to sort of say, maybe it isn't. That isn't good for me, even though the government is telling me it is. And I feel quite pleased that for myself, I wish I could do it for other people. And there is other people, as you say, there is people around the world. I know of nobody, but I know of lots of people who've said, my husband, he has terrible gut pain. And I tell them about the FODMAP diet, and I tell them about the carnivore, and they're like, and I think, well, carry on then, mate.
They'll be back in a couple of years when nothing else works, and so you just kind of keep doing it. And like I said, some of the people that are the biggest detractors of this diet I've had, believe it or not, vegans that have just thought I was, Hitler incarnate or something like that, the devil incarnate. They come back a few years later and say, "Man, I'm sorry, dude, you were right." So you just keep pressing on and you just kind of share your thing. And I want to thank you for doing it. We're coming to the end of our time, Annette. So it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. And I can just tell how much excitement you have about this, and you're a great advocate for this. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks.
Thanks for being willing to share this. But also, it's just wonderful to see another person whose life has been dramatically improved by just a very simple thing. It's not complicated, right? It's very easy. So thank you very much.
Bye-bye.